top 5 now, okay. So I'm going to try to make these, particularly with a lot of these films in the top 5. I have done reviews for them already, and I go into more detail about them and stuff in the original videos. Even though I do say I don't spoil anything. Nowadays we can spoil stuff, but even then, you don't have to have a movie spoiled for you just to get the full effect of it. But anyways, let's chug along. This is one of the more controversial, I'm sure, for some of you picks. Number 5, I put ahead of the Avengers, ahead of even Zero Dark 30. I put The Dark Knight Rises. For me, the viewing experience of this film really defined it. That first viewing experience, when I first saw it, I just held my breath for about the whole 2 hour, 45 minutes the film runs. And I have to say, even though since then it's had diminishing returns, and it was, originally way up, probably number 2 on my list, or number 1 earlier, before I'd seen the top picks, and then, as it fell, I still thought, here's the thing about the film, and this will be the main point of just why it's number 5. I am defending the film because the fanboys are idiots. The fanboys are idiots. Now, I can't defend the plot holes. I can't defend Bruce Wayne getting back to Gotham in 5 minutes, even though even though he's halfway around the world, even though there's no way into Gotham without getting your head blown off, even though there's all that, I can't defend that. But you fanboys are idiots. Absolute idiots. Looking back, and I'm thinking, whenever I think about the film, I always think of the Christy Lemire thing that happened. Christy Lemire, if you're unfamiliar, is a film critic, and she was on Roger Ebert Presents, kind of like a contemporary version of Siskel and Ebert, review show with critics talking about modern movies, and the latest movies coming out. And also she does What the Flick on YouTube, which is a show I occasionally watch. And it's good to see they have usually anywhere from 2 to 4 critics talking about films, and they usually go about 10, 15, sometimes 20 minutes. And and they're fun reviews to watch, and I do watch them. And she's almost always on the show. And I do have to say that the whole thing that was when she came out and reviewed the film, she gave it a negative review, and literally, I can't think of any fanboy on the internet that, unnamed, of course, that didn't light a torch and try to burn her ass. That they seriously went after her in particular, and because of that, there were significant consequences. Like Rotten Tomatoes, before you could put comments on people's reviews, couldn't do it anymore because she was seriously getting death threats from people. And there were fanboys who were thinking, the only thing that can happen is the Dark Knight Rises has to get 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. And it was ridiculous. Now, I went into The Dark Knight Rises with fair expectations. I went in saying, okay, look at the last film. Just look at The Dark Knight. How can you top that? The answer is you don't. You don't, you stupid, ignorant son of a bitch fanboys. You don't top The Dark Knight. And I did not expect The Dark Knight Rises to top The Dark Knight. And it didn't. Fair enough. Because what can top The Dark Knight? Very few films, at least in the realm of comic book films, can. The only one that does for me is Superman the movie, but that's just me. Seriously, the fanboys attacked this movie because their expectations were beyond the ceiling and beyond the roof of any expectation they'd ever seen. I think the expectation, and I don't think I'm exaggerating here, the fanboys' expectations for this film were higher than Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. They were higher than Man of Steel, way higher. The expectations for this were so incredibly high that no matter what Nolan did, even if he made the Lawrence of Arabia of Batman films, which some people say he did with The Dark Knight, you couldn't top it. You just couldn't meet those expectations. And you couldn't surpass those expectations, let alone. This is where the fanboys are incredibly stupid. Seriously. If you look at The Dark Knight Rises just as a film, not as a sequel to The Dark Knight, not as the last in this whole trilogy, just as a film by itself, it is still a damn great movie. Like the whole, like every subplot has a meaning and an impact, and it works pretty much. The whole thing, Talia al Ghul, yeah, maybe that wasn't quite as good as it could have come off, but still, like the Bane as the villain worked. Catwoman especially worked, and even Christian Bale with the Cookie Monster Batman voice. He's not Batman all that much. He doesn't use the voice as much as he did in The Dark Knight. So in that way, it improves on The Dark Knight. Not to say that it's going to top it, and it shouldn't. It really was almost. It's almost impossible to do that. And it's just seriously like, what were people thinking? Were people expecting this to be, like the Da Vinci Code? Like I don't know. Like Da Vinci Code, like the crack, in order to crack it, you have to top The Dark Knight? No. And the way I put it is everybody compared Dark Knight, as far as Batman Begins go, like Godfather to Godfather Part 2. And then I almost said it back then, but I wasn't smart enough to say it, but for every Godfather Part 2, you have to have a Godfather Part 3. And in this case, yeah, maybe Godfather Part 3 was worse than Godfather Part 2, and it was, big time, a big drop-off of talent and success. But The Dark Knight Rises was not as big of a drop-off. No. It's still a great movie. Just the performances work, the subtle moments, especially in the first act with Alfred, really work. Like that scene where Alfred and Bruce split ways, in the theater, it almost had me like having an emotional reaction. Because I was like, oh, why does Alfred have to go? And his speech was great, and especially that scene in the third act, like almost within the last 10 minutes of the film, where Alfred's at Bruce's grave, and he's like, I failed, and Thomas and Martha Wayne's grave is right next to him. He says, I'm so sorry, I failed you, and he's like, you trusted me with your son, you entrusted me, and I failed you, and just the crushing defeat, and of course it's Michael Caine, so it's great. But it's just, seriously, those moments, I was just like, and of course in the theater I was still thinking, even though I've told the story, I knew what was going to happen, because of some damn idiot YouTube user commenting and getting his comment liked by 5,000 people, like putting a thumb up their ass, the like symbol. Seriously, if I had not, I would have been probably in tears breaking down at that moment if I hadn't known that Bruce was still going to live through it. Because at that moment, there were people in the theater, they were thinking, oh my God, they did not just kill off Batman. I mean, if you put Bruce Wayne's gravestone in the movie, you're getting pretty serious. You're getting to the point where, yeah, people are going to think this actually happened. The whole thing of, the autopilot, all that. Which, and yeah, people do complain about stuff, and I do understand, and there are plot holes in the film, but seriously, the moments that hit hard, like that end truck sequence with the Batwing, it is not the Bat. I'm so sick of people just calling it the Bat. That is the Batwing. I don't care what Lucius Fox said. That is the Batwing, damn it. The Batwing coming through, and the Batpod, the way they combined the three elements of the trilogy with the original tank, the Batpod, and the Batwing, just progressively getting more and more badass. Seriously, the way they all came together, and the whole end fight, seriously, I was like, that was like an Indiana Jones action scene, to me anyways. I was just like, that is your big moment, explosions going on, grenades going on, all this stuff going on, and I was just like, whoa, all this stuff, and it was seriously, it was one of the most fun times I had in the cinema in a long, long time, up to that point, like, as far as just action films go. It did remind me of, like, Harry Potter, Deathly Hallows Part 2, in the way that those action scenes were just so much fun, and so big, and so rousing. Yeah, that's all I can say. It's just, wow. The film, when it hits big time. Especially in the Bane fight with Batman in the sewers, where he does, Bane breaks Batman's back. Impeccable stuff. Truly great stuff. And I know a lot of people start to think, well, if Sean Connery had played Bane, this is exactly what it would have sounded like. All this stuff that people bring up, and I know, you fight like a young man with nothing held back. All this stuff, yeah, sure, you can make fun of it. Maybe the voice wasn't perfect. But Bane had his really badass moments. He really works as a villain. Catwoman works as a great side character. Everything works in the film. Even Marion Cotillard, she was my least favorite character in the film, and ended up being one of the things that fans criticize the most. Sure, but they more than make up for it. They more than make up for it. Again, this is just me speaking. And the fanboys are complete idiots for having their expectations so high that nobody and nothing could ever match them. Even if the Star Wars of our generation came out, they wouldn't have smashed those expectations. You idiots out there thinking that The Dark Knight Rises should have been the biggest thing ever. It wasn't, and I didn't really expect it to. And it did, I went in with fair expectations. I said, I just hope I said it's better than Batman Begins, because I know I'm virtually alone. I'm isolated in this opinion, but Batman Begins is an overrated film. It's overrated. I'm sorry, but it is. And I won't go into it now since we've been here for probably an hour. But just trust me, The Dark Knight Rises is, if you just look at it by itself, a great film. A great film. Absolutely wonderful. Breathtaking action, breathtaking cinematography especially. And the whole pit scene, I know a lot of people like to criticize that too. How do you get HD in a pit that's halfway around the world where you can't even, all that stuff? Sure. But that whole pit scene is also really intense with, can he make it? Can he rise up to what he was before? All this stuff, the symbolism and everything, it's groundbreaking. It's absolutely groundbreaking in field of comic books, of going to that level of darkness in a character and all this stuff. And I do think it is the best Christian Bale performance in the Batman movies that we got, was in The Dark Knight Rises. But without being here for the rest of the day, let me just say, all those people who hated on Batman, the last Batman movie, The Dark Knight Rises, just because their expectations were still from The Dark Knight, shame on you, shame on you. Go back and watch the movie. It's way better. It's way better than what you're giving it. And that's all I have to say about that. Number 5 on our list. Oh, Jesus.
Mine's about to go off on that, too.
Okay, we're ready for number 4. Number 4 is Lincoln, from Steven Spielberg, with one of the best casts ever assembled. We have Daniel Day-Lewis, we have Sally Field, we have Tommy Lee Jones, we have David Strathairn, we have Joseph Gordon-Levitt, we have, I'm trying to think of all the people we have, even, what's his name, the Green Goblin pops up for about 10 seconds in the movie. We have, I'm trying to think of who else was in the film. We had, James Spader in the film, and he was a lot of fun. We had John Hawkes in the film. We had Tim Blake Nelson, or not Tim, was it Tim Blake Nelson? I can't remember who that was. That character. It might have been Tim Blake Nelson. All sorts of fun characters, great characters, big characters, historical characters, and it is one of the better, period dramas we've gotten since the Golden Age, which was back, way back, once we got into the 50s, 60s, all those character dramas. Like the Shakespeare 50s, 60s, even late 40s stuff, back to Hamlet and Henry V and all that stuff. And we did have a silver age there when we got to Age of Innocence and Amadeus and all that stuff. But anyways, this is a return to form for that. And seriously, I do think, for me personally, that Abraham Lincoln is a hero of mine. And such an historical figure and a father figure to modern America. That, seriously, that Daniel Day-Lewis, I went in saying, okay, it's Daniel Day-Lewis. I sure hope he does at least a modestly good job. He was absolutely brilliant. He does not give a performance in the film. He transforms himself into Abraham Lincoln. Seriously, it is it's indescribably great how he transforms himself into Lincoln. And Sally Field is impeccably great. If it wasn't for Anne Hathaway in Les Mis, which was, in all fairness, a better performance and a more emotional performance, and just how do you top that performance? So that's one thing, and she might have been, in another year she would have won her third Oscar. And Tommy Lee Jones, just his performance was my favorite performance of Best Supporting Actors of 2012. He was just so much fun to watch. His scene, especially when he's talking about the purpose of the amendment and all that stuff. When he gives that speech, he's criticizing these people over here and all that stuff. When he gives that speech, that performance, it's wow. And he is, save for one scene in the film with him and Abe Lincoln, like pretty much the one scene in the whole film they share together, he outdoes everybody else in the scene. And sometimes he's with some very great actors, even if they're not like the bigger names actors. He outdoes Sally Field in that one scene of him and her at the White House dinner. He outdoes everybody. And then on top of that, then you have Tony Kushner's brilliant, absolutely spot-on perfect script, which is, and I'm not really an expert in 19th century dialogue, but I'm pretty sure that was how they spoke back then. Like when Thaddeus Stevens is making his big speeches using these big words that half the audience doesn't understand. When Lincoln's telling his stories and stuff, it's like that's exactly what they would have said, I think. Like I said, I'm no expert in this. I don't. I have read previously on Abe Lincoln. Of course, all the grade school stuff, like for little kids, always talks about chopping wood and saving pigs and stuff he did in his childhood. But I haven't really read up too much on his diplomatic years and his presidency, except for, of course, Civil War stuff. And that's the thing. Lincoln could have easily been, a half and half. We tell, a little bit about Lincoln's life and his diplomacy and stuff, and his presidency and all that, and then we focus on the Civil War. We see battles and stuff. And really, we see like 3 shots, maybe 4 or 5 shots of a fight, and that's all we get. And yeah, there were people that I talked to who had seen the movie who said that was the most disappointing thing. They said, we were going in expecting a Civil War movie. All we got was a guy talking about Revolutionary War stuff and being a lawyer. And that's pretty much what they said. And I said, you're missing the point here. The point is not to tell the story of the Civil War. It's telling about the 14th Amendment, or the 13th Amendment, sorry, not the 14th. The 13th Amendment. It's telling about passing that amendment and focusing a little bit on Lincoln's life, his family life, his wife, his sons, and all that. One of his sons dies in the White House, and one of them dies later. And, and he dies, of course. And one died before they got to the White House. And his wife, suffers migraines, is a manic depressant pretty much, goes crazy after her husband and son die. She loses like 3 sons or whatever. She goes nuts. And this is just somebody, like, I've seen, like, maybe other documentaries and stuff on it. But, and the way, Sally Field captures Mary Todd, and of course, like I said, Daniel Day-Lewis just absolutely is Lincoln. And seriously, those are my favorite parts, where he's telling stories. Like, he's talking about his lawyer days. He's talking about, I forgot the, Ethan Allen, the Revolutionary War story. The nothing makes an Englishman shit quicker than the sight of George Washington. Brilliant stuff. And then on top of that, then you get, great moments in, and it's one of the most entertaining political movies ever. It's funny, it's got humor, it's got heart, it has, you feel the height of the war. You feel the war. You don't have to see it, and that's the brilliance of Spielberg's direction, and why, other than, of the 5 directors nominated that year for Best Director, why I think Steven Spielberg was the best of the 5 in his work on Lincoln, because he shows you the Civil War without showing you the Civil War. He shows you what the people have been through, and, how their experience has been, just through their faces and their actions. He doesn't have to show you the big battles and the huge explosions, cannon fire, and and people, being amputated at hospitals, getting their arms and legs cut off, just trying to save their lives. No, he doesn't have to show you that. He has to just show you the people that are alive that know this is going on, who want this to stop. The politicians, the people, Hal Holbrook's character. When he goes, he's saying, the roads are going to open up soon, and we'll have 4 bloody springs in a row. And all this stuff, and it's powerful stuff. Absolutely powerful stuff, on top of the strong dialogue, on top of the magnificent performances, on top of the top-notch production values, even the musical score by, of course, longtime favorite John Williams, longtime favorite of mine. Oh my God, it's an experience unlike anything else as far as political movies go, set in a different time era that I've seen. I mean, I still think there is room where, and as Lincoln shows, movies like this can be immensely successful. I mean, the box office on this film, people weren't expecting maybe more than $50 million out of the film. Because nobody, I don't know, a few weeks even before they released the film, everybody said, well, nobody's going to go see a 2.5-hour movie of people talking. $180 million worth of people went to go see a movie about people talking. They did. And the mass majority of them liked it. So that shows you what Spielberg and company can do. Tony Kushner, I think, is probably the biggest hero. He should have won Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars that year. And of the 5 nominated, I think Spielberg did the best job of directors that year. And, of course, Daniel Day-Lewis, far out ahead of everybody. Even Bradley Cooper, who I mentioned earlier, I said he was, fantastic. I even compared him to Jack Nicholson in one of his movies. Wasn't as good as Daniel Day-Lewis, and this is, top workers in the film industry, on top of their class, doing some of their best work, some of them in years, and it's a crowning achievement, absolutely crowning achievement for Spielberg and company. Well done, sirs and ma'ams. Brilliant work. And this is just number 4 on my top 10 list. So and 2012 just overall was a great year in film. And so yeah, that's number 4. That's Lincoln. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty now. This is top-notch stuff now. This is top 3. This is good stuff. Number 3, Skyfall. I have been a James Bond fan for a long time. And, Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, even Casino Royale lately, damn good Bond films. Skyfall is one you add to that list. Skyfall is absolutely one of those films you add to the list. I mean, of course, this comes from director Sam Mendes, who's, this is the guy who did American Beauty, for crying out loud. Of course, it's going to be a great Bond film. And on top of it, you have one of your best Bonds in years, probably the best since the original, Sean Connery, and Daniel Craig. You have probably our best M we've ever had, even with Bernard Lee being a fantastic character back in the 60s, 70s. Judi Dench is an actress of our time, and one of the best actresses, not just in Britain, in the world. I mean, my God, this woman is talented. And then you have one of our best Bond villains in a super-ass long time. Probably the best Bond villain we've had. You'd have to go back probably to the 60s, 70s. I mean, just for me personally, I think he's the best we've had since Robert Davi in License to Kill. But I think that villain was really great, even though it's a little bit of a stock performance. Just the writing of the character was great, in my opinion. But the 90s and 2000 Bond villains, with the exception probably being Casino Royale, the villains were very, very stock and usually empty-headed. Again, a rare exception, probably when I think about it, is Tomorrow Never Dies. Jonathan Pryce actually had some energy to him, but just in the writing of the villain, wow, this guy is original. This is not a guy who wants to take over the world. This is not a guy who's after, global, or like an economic monopolization or anything like that. It's just a simple revenge mission. And this guy's like, I want to kill M, and that's what I'm going for. Okay, We haven't seen that in Bond since, ever? I'm trying to think, have we ever seen anything like this? Yeah, we have had some Bond films where M has had some purpose in the plot. I mean, like, in addition to just being a character in the beginning who says, here's your mission, go, I'm exposition, go. Like, Bernard Lee literally had one scene in the first Bond film. And he had 2 scenes in the next couple films. But yeah, sometimes that M character is absolutely throwaway. And in this case, no. In this case, M is like the second most important character. And usually, yeah, like I said, sometimes M's just there for the first scene and that's it. And literally, I think it's brilliant to do that. And to break down the barriers a little bit of a Bond film and do something like that. Because I mentioned it in the review, and it's one of the lengthy reviews, I know. But seriously, they do not introduce the Bond villain, like, show his actual face, until almost the start of the third act. And that is something Bond has not done. I can't think of an example where they do that. I mean, the closest probably they come to when I think all the way back to all those Bond villains, and this is the 23rd Bond film, for crying out loud, 23. The closest we probably come to in that, where they actually, for the very first time, show the villain, almost the start of the third act. Like, it's in the second half of the picture. Oh boy, I don't know how far, we'd have to go probably all the way back to, oh geez, I can't even think. Maybe Blofeld in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And that was 69! That was almost 50 years ago! Wow! I mean, my God! I mean, Bond villain, they don't do that in Bond films. That's kind of neat. I mean, and it's a way to differentiate yourself from the other Bond films. It's a way to, show you've got something here that's more than your standard Bond pick. Like the last one, Quantum of Solace, that was everybody's complaint, is, wow, Casino Royale breathed fresh air into the franchise, and it did. It did. Like, still, that scene with Vesper and Bond on the train, their first scene, still makes me laugh and smile every time I see it. And that's the other kind of risk that the Bond film takes, is it doesn't really have that central leading lady character. I mean, we have Moneypenny and we have the throwaway girl, but that's about it. Nothing else. And even then, Moneypenny is not present in the third act, except for the end scene. So, yeah, it's a different type of Bond film. Revenge is the premise for the villain. M is involved almost all the way through. Bond, with the whole thing of him being weak, having to retrain, which they have kind of done before a little bit. You only live twice, he faked his death, so it's not completely original in that idea. And like I said, it's the Bond opening is usually a good sign for how the film's gonna go. Like, rarely do we really see a fantastic Bond opening and then a crummy picture. Probably the worst is View to a Kill, because that opening sequence has really fun moments. And then they reveal Bond. Because he wears, sunglasses and a big, cover or something, and then he takes it off and we're like, oh my God, Roger Moore looks like he's 80 years old. Yeah, that's the closest we've come to a Bond film with a good opening and then a really bad film to follow it. And on top of it, what can I say? The Skyfall song, which I don't think I mentioned it way too much in the original review, but since then, yeah, that song it's a good song. Even though I'm not huge on modern music, Adele is a very, very talented vocalist, and what can I say? She did a great job on the song. And it's the first Bond song to win an Oscar, so yeah, kudos to them. And on top of it, you've got the high-class action. You have brilliant work in the script, especially the writing. The Tennyson poem is just brilliant. That M delivers during the whole thing when she's under review and all that. The emissary, whatever it is. The hearing, yeah, anyways. And just the action, everything just runs smoothly, brilliant pace, even though it runs at 2 hours 23 minutes, it doesn't feel like it. Feels like just a nice rounded 2 hour movie with a lot of stuff thrown in. Impeccable job. And it's another thing where we go into the next Bond film, we have to remember Skyfall is one of those rare instances in Bond films. I'm not going to go quite as far as to say it's the Dark Knight of James Bond films, but I hope to God the Bond fanboys, and I am a big one, like, I really criticized the film, and I still hold the criticism of the film of putting that Bond gun barrel sequence in the end credits, which is, in my book, you don't cross that line, and they have already twice now. The idea, like, I kind of was hinting at it in the original video, if I remember right, saying, well, I kind of would like the next Bond villain to kind of go back to that, take over the world style, except do it a little smarter now, which I think they could do. They could write that in, and also they've been talking about in the next Bond film writing in more gadgets and stuff, because that's kind of the one thing that the really 70s and 80s Bond fans have been kind of missing in these last few films is where's the Bond gadgets that Q gives out. And reintroducing Q was a nice move. Now they have that set. Introducing a new M, that's set. And Ralph Fiennes, oh my god, what a great actor to fill that role, by the way. Absolutely, like, impeccably cast. Totally brilliant. Not only is he a great actor, but I think he's going to start looking more and more like Bernard Lee as it goes on. Because, just compare the two, they, except Bernard Lee was maybe just a little bit more, full, so to say. Just, fatter, sorry. No, don't strike me down now. But, and Ralph Fiennes is relatively more fit. So if they maybe, fatten him out a little bit, he would look almost, and he was just like 10, 11 years older. He'd look just like Bernard Lee. Yeah, so, that's the whole run there. So yeah, basically, Skyfall is a lovely film. Absolutely, the way it's shot. Roger Deakins, gorgeous cinematography. And, it's a brilliant film. Absolutely brilliant. Number 3 on my list, Skyfall. And it's another one that I've been able to rewatch a lot, because it just has that rewatchability. I mean, Mr. Silva, Javier Bardem as the villain, is, I can't praise him enough. This is the guy who won an Oscar for No Country for Old Men. He's a great guy. In personal life, I'm sure he can only play the villain in movies, but yeah. So yeah, great, just absolutely bravo work, and Sam Mendes is coming back on the next film, so yes, it's going to be Bond 24. I hope it's going to live up to Skyfall. But again, I'm going to go in with muted expectations, say, okay, Skyfall was a stroke of genius, but it's not a Bond film that is going to be, huge. It's not going to be, something that we have to just say, the next film has to be this good. It has to be this good or else everything sucks. No way.